control of inheritance. According to the Columbia Encyclopedia, inheritance in law is the, quote, right to acquire property on the death of the owner. In Anglo-American law, inheritance is by the grace of the state, which may exercise any degree of control over the property of the decedent, that is, the owner who dies, including the total estate. Including the total estate, that is, government acquisition of title, end quote, by the grace of the state. And how much grace does the state have? Since when has the state been the source of grace? When the state enters into the question of inheritance, property gradually is transferred from the family to the state. The inheritance tax is simply a first step in that program of confiscation. For the family to maintain itself, the family must control inheritance, and the biblical laws of inheritance are entirely family laws. The Bible kept property immune from taxation and from anything but family control of inheritance. Inheritance, according to the Bible, was a sign of faith, character, and godliness on the part of man. Character and godliness on the part of a man. The Bible declares, "A good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children," Proverbs 13:22. And as H.B. Clark, a law editor, stated in his study of biblical law, quote, "There is nothing in Jewish law to warrant the belief that the king or the state has any right to inherit property upon the death of the owner without proper heirs," end quote. The control of property and the inheritance. The control of property and inheritance is entirely within the jurisdiction of the family in biblical law. What was the consequence of the biblical law of inheritance? It meant simply that power was concentrated into the hands of the family. This meant that the authority of the family over its children was a very real one and an undiminished power. The discipline of parents over their children was unquestioned because authority and economic power rested in the family. The Bible is a realistic book. God knows that man respects authority, which has power behind it. When an order is given, that order is futile unless it can be supported by the power to enforce it. If power is transferred from the family to the state, then the ability to give orders and to maintain order is transferred from the family to the state. Educational philosophies begin to speak of, quote, the children of the state, end quote, because parental authority has been transferred to the state. According to Carl C. Zimmerman and Lucius F. Cervantes in their study, Marriage and Family, Western society has had a family organization since Christianity became the faith of the West. A man's life, from birth to death, is guided, affected, and colored by family relations. The basic unit of the social order is the family. The family is the socially stable unit where the family has liberty and property. As a result, the totalitarians hate the family and declare it to be the enemy of social change. Totalitarianism hates the family because it is the basic thesis of all totalitarians that man's first loyalty must be to the state, whereas the Christian family's first allegiance is to the triune God. The totalitarian therefore seeks to abolish the family. Lenin said, quote, "No nation can be free when half the population is enslaved in the kitchen," end quote. As a result, the communist state abolished the family as a legal entity until 1936, and the family since then has merely been a legal breeding ground for the state. The Soviet Union, 2 years after the revolution, announced, quote, The family has ceased to be a necessity both for its members and for the state. End quote. Women were quote-unquote freed from the kitchen only to become the unskilled labour force of the Soviet Union. According to Zimmerman and Cervantes, among the means taken by the Soviet Union, quote, to abolish the family, end quote, were the following, quote, the forbidding of parents to give religious instruction to their children, the encouraging of children to denounce their parents, the abolishing of inheritance, the equalization of the, quote, non-registered marriage, end quote, with the registered one, the promulgation of 3 forms of common ménage contract for an indefinite period, for a definite period, for a single occasion. This latter legal expedient was a propaganda piece aimed to demolish the difference between prostitution, promiscuity and monogamy. The legalization of bigamy and the abolishing of the legal differences between legitimacy and illegitimacy were other minor steps with the same purports as the destruction of the family. Free love in a free state became the ideal. Family life was declared to be, quote, especially harmful to collective life, end quote, end quote. In the United States, the attack on the family is being steadily mounted. The state increasingly claims jurisdiction over the family, its children, income, and property. The state assumes that it knows what is best for children, and it claims the right to interfere for the children's welfare. As a result, the family is progressively weakened in order to strengthen the power of the state. The authority of parents is legally weakened, and children are given legal rights to undercut their parents. According to Zimmerman and Cervantes, the reality today in our courts is a very startling one. They report, quote, thus, in New York, Chicago and Boston, children are now allowed to sue second spouses of a parent some years later for alienation of love and affection of the parent. In New York and Chicago, the children have won these cases, but they are still pending in Boston. Thus, also, we have the New York case where a divorced mother, custodian of children, was imprisoned for neglect some years after the divorce. The husband was safe because he was not given custody, although the earlier, quote, discoloration, end quote, theory would have blamed him also, end quote. Such powers, when given to the child, are not for the child's welfare. They are destructive of the family and of the child, and the more the state legislates over the family, supposedly for its welfare, the more it destroys the family. No institution can long exist if it is not free. The more controlled an institution becomes, the less life it has. Its life and functions are transferred to the controlling agent, or they simply cease to be. How long would a club last if its every act were controlled by the state? The life and authority of the family depends on the liberty of the family, and the economic expression of the family's independence is the right to private ownership of property and the right of inheritance. Now, where the family controls inheritance, it also controls marriage. This Friedrich Engels noted in his study of the origin of the family, private property, and the state. But the Bible long ago plainly recorded it. When Jacob became the heir, his father Isaac, quote, blessed him and charged him and said unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Genesis 28:1. In other words, the father had the power to require a godly marriage because Isaac was leaving a sizable inheritance. He had a stake in the future, and because he had a stake in that future, he had a right to control it by requiring a godly marriage. This was a legitimate and godly power. The Bible, as a result, gives a great deal of space to laws of inheritance. Roger Sherman Gaylor, in his classification of biblical law, takes more than 7 pages merely to list these laws. Where the father possesses private property and provides for his children's care and future and controls their inheritance, it is the authority of the father which governs the family. where the state assumes the responsibility for the welfare and education of the children and assures them of future social security. It is the authority of the state which governs the children. Power over private property is authority. Where the state controls property, income, and inheritance, power has been transferred to the state. Honour and authority go hand in hand, and where parents have authority, they are more readily honoured. The biblical law declares, quote, "Honour thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee." Exodus 20:12. It is because God gave this law that he gave also the laws concerning private ownership of property and the right of inheritance. The two go hand in hand. God forbid adultery because he has ordained and established the family as the basic and central social unit of mankind. God therefore commands private ownership of property and private control of inheritance in order that the family may be maintained in its honour and authority. We do not honour the family or parents if we strip them of their powers. In fact, we are now being told that the family is obsolete. One prominent and influential churchman has said that the family is, like the tribe, a relic of the past. The tribe served its purpose and is now gone. The family, a great institution for its time, has also seen its day, and it must make way for a new structuring of society. The death of the family is therefore planned, and on every continent the executioners are at work. Together with the death of the family, the quote-unquote death of God is also proclaimed, and we are assured that the new age has no need for God or the family. The menace and intensity of dedication of these hostile forces cannot be underestimated. They are an active, powerful, and highly organized force in modern society. But even more, we dare not underestimate the power of the triune God, who rules the nations and fulfills his holy purpose despite all the vain conspiracies and wild imaginations of men. But none can share in God's victory unless they stand forth clearly in terms of him and his holy cause, unless they separate themselves unto him. Jesus Christ said, "He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth abroad." Matthew 12:30. And you, where do you stand? All right, Ski, gotta get this heavy jacket off. It's about 25 degrees in the Caribbean seas. Here, in the booth of truth, the tanning salon of verity. Okay, see you in a second. Alrighty. Time for chapter 17. 17. The function of the family. Get rid of that click. That's rubbish. Historically and biblically, the family is the central institution in law and in society. Although we do not think of the family normally as a lawmaking body, the family is nonetheless the basic lawmaking body in all history. Every point of power and authority is also a point of law, and historically, family law has been the basic law of mankind. In any society or institution, there are basic rules of conduct, and these rules of conduct constitute its law structure. The family is man's basic lawmaking body because of a variety of reasons, but certainly one of the first of these is the fact that it is the first place man, as a child, encounters law, rules of conduct, and his idea of law is shaped and defined to a great degree by the family. Life is seen through a law structure which the family gives to the child, and this law structure defines life for the child. But this is not all. The child's attitude towards every other institution and its laws is largely shaped by the family. How the child approaches and reacts to church, school, states, and society depends greatly on his source of law, parental authority. He can face other law-making bodies rebelliously, or he can face them obediently. His attitude can be constructive, destructive, or indifferent, depending on his family background to a large degree. Every parent daily is a lawmaking person, a focal point of law enforcement, and the delinquency of parents in this respect is their delinquency before God, their Lord and Sovereign. It is obvious, of course, that procreation, birth, is a function of the family, and in a healthy, biblically oriented and governed family system, this function is preceded by an important fact that conditions birth. The parents marry because there is a bond of faith and love between them, a resolution to maintain for life a covenant under God. As a result, a heredity of faith and a unity in terms of it are established as a prior condition of birth, so that a child born into such a family has an inheritance which cannot be duplicated. The biblical family cannot be rivaled by man, science, or imagination as the institution for the procreation and rearing of children. Moreover, the family is man's first and basic school. Parents have very extensively educated their children before the child ever sets foot inside a school. Moreover, every mother regularly performs the most difficult of all educational tasks, one which no school performs. The mother takes a small child, incapable of speaking or understanding a word in any language, and, in a very short time, teaches it the mother tongue. That's for the slabbers. This is a difficult and painstaking task, but it comes simply and naturally in a family and is an expression of the mother's love and the child's response to that love. At every stage of the child's life, the educational function of the home is the basic educational power in the life of the child. For education to cease to be parent-controlled and become state-controlled is deadly to both education and the child. The family is also the first government in the life of the child, with the father as the God-ordained head of the household and his government under God as the basics. Head of the household and his government under God as the basic, as the child's basic. And his government under God as the child's basic government. The children are not the only ones. The children are not the only ones. The children are not the only ones who are governed by the family. The parents are also. The mother is governed in her activities by the requirements of her husband and children. The father is governed by the necessities of providing for his family, protecting them, and giving them the example and leadership they need. Where the family is not self-supporting, there is neither power nor authority in the person of the father. Welfare families from the days of the Roman Empire. My mind's elsewhere. Welfare families from the days of the Roman Empire to the present have been notorious for the undisciplined, immoral and delinquent characters, and welfare families have always been marked by a general lack of masculine authority. A man who will not provide for his family, accumulate respect and cherish private property, will have neither the authority nor the ability to govern with wisdom and honour. Lacking self-governance, he cannot govern others. Welfare destroys family life and creates more evils than it tries to solve. Another basic function of the family is motivation and guidance. The child is provided with the best kind of guidance because the family is most interested in him, and the child is, in the Christian family, given the highest kind of motivation for his own future and present development. The family also has a major economic function. The father provides for his family, not for strangers. Welfare agencies maintained by state and federal agencies have provided some kind of economic assistance for as many as 15 and more millions at one time, but daily far more than 100 million persons are supported by the family itself. Persons are supported by the family system. Under statist welfare, there is a disintegration of the individual and of the family and extensive demoralization. Under the family system, untold millions are supported ably and well with the best of social consequences. Under welfare, education declines. There is less interest in the discipline and results of learning and less ability to progress as a result. Under the family system, children are not only intellectually motivated for the best educational results, but they are economically financed through grade in high school, college, and sometimes graduate school, so that the most ambitious educational enterprise of history is economically dependent on the family system. In terms of sheer economic efficiency, nothing in all of history has ever equaled the family. By comparison, statist welfare and communist takeovers of the family's economic functions are pathetic and tragic failures. Socially, this magnificent economic institution, the family, has no equal in its contribution to social stability and order. To reduce the reason for marriage in the family to love is to deny the vast and varying social functions of the family. But in the biblical perspective, the family and marriage are governed not by love. The family and marriage are governed not by love as the only sufficient reason or the social consequences, but by the covenant with God and the Word of God. The family, as an economic unit, has an excellent division of labour plan, whereby certain duties are required of the father, others of the mother, and still others of the children. There are mutual rights and duties, all of which are discharged with a greater degree of success and efficiency, despite all the problems, than in any other institution. The family, moreover, can withstand and survive more shock than any other institution. Economic disasters, personal disagreements, social catastrophes, and the like. The family has also a valuable policing and protective function. The members of the family police one another. They work to keep their members in line and out of trouble. The members of a family not only police and punish one another, but they also protect one another, and theirs is a cradle-to-grave protective function. When civil governments talk about cradle-to-grave security, they are simply imitating the family and offering the state as a substitute for the family. Throughout history and today, the family has provided cradle-to-grave security for the overwhelming majority of all men and has done a most satisfactory job of it. The state has botched up its every attempt to replace the family. Today, the state has worked to limit the authority, power, and ability of the family, and then has turned to blame the family for conditions the state has created. The state has extensively interfered in the family's functions, and it has claimed vast areas that properly belong to the family. Does this mean that the family has been weakened? Does the future portend a decline in the importance of the family? On the contrary, the more the state has interfered, the more it has thereby underscored man's need for the family. The incompetence of the state as family has... Okay, I didn't quite get that, obviously. The incompetence of the state as family has made more obvious the competence of the family as family. The prevalence of sickness does not make health obsolete, but only all the more urgently needed and desired. Historically, every period of statism is followed by an era of an intensely family-oriented society as men turn from sickness to death. To health. We are today in an era of burgeoning statism, On every side, the family is under attack, and the state is assuming progressively more and more of the family's functions, and progressively finding itself more and more prone to social disintegration and demoralization. More than ever before, the biblical faith and law concerning the family, its functions, property, and faith must be stressed and taught. The future does not belong to disease, it belongs to health. Because this is God's world, it is God's order which shall prevail. Except the Lord build a house, they labour in vain that build it. Psalm 127, 1. Okay, I think I'm going to end it there for the meantime and catch up with you in the following chapters. It was nice to have you. If you want to support this work, you can do so by liking and sharing and doing all those groovy things that only the cool cats do in the funky style. If you want to support the work financially to help me do more better, then you can do that with a heart and a half by going to nathanteacher.com and clicking on the Donati button to give either monthly or a one-off gift. Thanks very much, and hope to see you in chapter